Hello, and thanks for joining us here at Finovate Spring on Finovate TV. My name is David Penn. I'm a research analyst with Finovate, and joining me today are two longtime friends of Finovate, Theo Lau and Bradley Leimer. Thank you both very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Quite a lot to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about the work that you do with Unconventional Ventures. I want to talk about the work you're going to be doing with us at Finovate Spring, some of the topics you're going to be discussing, and I certainly want to talk about the book that you both have put together, Beyond Good. So we've got a lot of things to cover. So let's just jump right into it. Maybe by way of starting, could you tell us just a little bit about the work you do with Unconventional Ventures? And maybe Theo, we'll start with you.
Sure, it depends on how much time you have for us. But we do quite a bit of things. First and foremost, we cause a lot of trouble in the fintech ecosystem. We tend to say things that people don't really like to hear, namely, who are the forgotten demographics in the ecosystem that we ought to be thinking more about, right? Thinking about the older adults, thinking about the gig economy workers, and especially thinking about women. And it's more profound, especially given what we've gone through the last year and looking at who got impacted the most by the pandemic and the economic downturn, and what we can do both within incumbent banks as well as fintech startups, and what we can do to help them recover and recover better. With a lot of that work, we do advisory with startups. We work with different organizations around the world. We do a podcast called One Vision that we run every week, that we invite entrepreneurs from around the world to tell us about their story. Stories with a purpose, that's what we would like to say. And we also write. Brad, what else do we do?
You know, when I think about Finovate and the what I call the Disneyland of fintech, what
you
I
have
like
that trademark, by the way, right?
Trademark more than a decade ago, before fintech was a word, right? No, I think that what we do, working with both corporates and startups and just everybody in the ecosystem within financial services, is try to make banking better. You know, everybody has a purpose in this, space, and we have seen great examples of founders and great examples of banks that have really made a difference. And we're trying to make that community that we focus on and we improve the financial lives as just bigger and broader and greater. And that's great to see, and that's great to be a part of.
Absolutely. I have to ask you, as we were talking before, it's been sort of the 1 year anniversary. A lot of us have seen each other. And it's also been basically the 1 year anniversary of the onset of the COVID crisis for many of us. I'm curious how that has affected the work that you do. I know, too, you pointed to some of the communities that are particularly impacted. I'm just curious in terms of the work you do and how it has been affected during this past 11 months.
Yeah, that was the last time I saw you, wasn't it, David, in Berlin? That was quite a year. I think a lot of the nature of the work has not changed, but how we do them has changed, definitely. Okay. Personally speaking, I have 2 kids at home who've been doing virtual learning since March. So that has been a challenge. And I think it brings to light a lot of the challenges that people face, working mothers face, but also more so the opportunities of how we can change our culture, how we can change our thinking and approach to work and make it different. The one good thing I do like is that because everyone is at home, all of a sudden everyone becomes more available to talk. You don't have to work around the travel schedule.
Yeah.
And I would just add that I think more people have the time to figure out, how to listen to new ideas and how to sort of read and dive into sort of new ways of business. And that's a lot of what, went into the book, because when I think about, the year that we've had, we finished this book during this past year, and we had to continually revise some of our thinking because it really has changed the way that we think about, the business model. So it's been great to see, though, that fintech itself has not slowed down. Venture investment into the space has not slowed down. And the number of companies that are focused on new communities and, communities that have long been sort of misrepresented in this space has continued to grow. So it's been a great year in some ways.
Yeah, in many ways, it's true. I want to turn to look a little bit about what you're going to be doing and talking about at Finovate Spring. Again, both of you longtime friends of Finovate Spring and really have really provided our audiences with a lot of very insightful observations about fintech writ large. Could you maybe talk to us a little bit about some of the themes that you're going to be addressing this year at the show?
Sure.
We'll start with you.
Yeah, one of the ones that we have is talking about financial inclusion, looking at financial services and how it services the mid to low income families, and how do we design things, as we often talk about, right? Do it for a purpose. Because, if we think about the onset of fintech, quote unquote, revolution, if you will, a lot of the new startups, they seem to regurgitate old ideas, things that have been around, and to just make it prettier. They create like this bamboo credit card. I've seen quite a few of those. But is that really changing our behavior? Is it really changing how we work? And more so in the West, are we really including more demographics and doing things better for them? And I would argue a lot of times we're not. So that's one of the themes we're diving into.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think inclusivity really, goes much broader than just a credit card and just lending and just credit. And that's, I think, a lot of what we discuss in these sessions is that there's more to a financial relationship than one side of the balance sheet. There's more to, the financial services model than just profitability. There's longer term implications of what we do every single day and every decision that we make. So I think that we'll just continue that conversation and engage as much as we can with the startups and the people that attend Finovate. And it's going to be a blast as always.
Yeah, it sounds good. And I tell you, one way that people can really engage the conversation further, of course, is to take a look at the book that the both of you have put together, Beyond Good. And I wanted to talk maybe just a little bit about that as well. First, is this the first published effort for both or either of you?
Yes,
Wow.
it is.
Wow.
And when we first started talking about the project, we were approached by the publisher in the UK, and we were so excited. And I still remember that big calendar we put together that, we need to work around all of these events and all of these cities that we're going to be going to and how we're going to put the materials together. Well, little do we know, when we first started writing, we were working around kiddos' virtual learning schedules and how we're gonna make everything work. We actually paused. We took a pause, both of us, because we both have children, and we needed time to reset and figure out what it is that we're doing and how do we, take care of our kids first.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest learning was, we had intended to, go on 20 trips this year, at least, and that's what we do because we shared this message. And to write the book under these circumstances was, everybody experienced a reset of some kind. Everybody experienced a new normal. And for us, diving into the writing was actually very therapeutic and was great because we had to talk to so many different people as part of this book.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing I love the most about what we have been able to do was so many people were so grateful to be willing to spend time with us. So Brett will tell you we had one painful truth about the book that's coming out is that we had to chop off 10,000 words. And we did that because we were very adamant about wanting to include people's stories and all the quotes that we have gotten. And we will also do a trade-off. And I'm like, we're not getting rid of people's stories because that is what makes the ecosystem beautiful is we have voices from everyone. We have the platform and we want to use that to lift up everyone's voices. So it's not just Brett and my opinion is, it's a book for everyone. And so we chopped off 10,000 of our own words.
That's a lot of words. When is the book coming out again?
March 3rd in the UK and the rest of the world. And for our US listeners for Finovate Spring, it will be March 30th.
Okay, excellent. I asked in part, I had the opportunity, thank you, Thea, to read the introduction and the chapter to the book. And I could certainly see how a large part of it might have been taken out because there is so much, even in that first chapter. You managed to cover a lot of statistical information. There's a lot of data in there. There's also a lot of a conversation about the theme and why this is an important conversation to have. And I wonder if maybe we could touch just a little bit about that in terms of either main thesis or top takeaways, however you prefer to address that of the book.
Brad, you want to go?
Yeah.
So when I would think about the book, it's kind of an extension of this idea from almost 20 years ago when Jim Collins wrote Good to Great. And it's that idea that a great company is more than creating shareholder value. And we've seen a lot of, sort of stakeholder capitalism and examples of companies that have tried to mean more for their business model and their communities. And that's what we celebrate in the book is that shift, is the shift that we can include more people in our communities, in society, and especially within financial services and technology companies. We really need to focus how we can serve these larger groups. Everybody in society should be able to be part of our business models. And And that's why we go beyond good.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now add to that is we want to reinforce it's not a zero-sum game, right? Just because we're including more demographics and more considerations on how we conduct business doesn't mean you're losing, right? So case in point, one of the things lately that we've been talking a lot about is student loan debt, $1.7 trillion of debt. And, obviously that the burden is shared across all demographics, but particularly for communities of color, first generation college students, and the less disadvantaged groups. And so our question is, so how are we going to go about solving it? Obviously, there's a lot of different moving parts, but one thing that we do see is, for financial services, the role isn't just to offer another loan on top of the pile of debt that you have, because that's not solving the problem. We need to go back further, is how do we create a more equal society, more equal products, and create services to help people rethink their finances and get to a healthier financial situation. That is the way to solve it, to help them get better, get healthy, instead of, here you go, here's another loan for your debt.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would call the book a question of conscience, and we talk about sort of the role of money in our lives. We talk about food, water, and shelter, and sort of the discrepancies between the have and the have-nots. And we talk a lot about how profit and how personal gain really come into the decisions that we make in our lifetimes and in our careers. And so this book it's really, for anybody working in almost any business, but especially in banking, it's for that teller that makes a difference every single day. It's for the loan decision maker, that creates the credit box that we make decisions on in our communities of who to give credit to. It's, everybody within the C-suite to really, really think about, do we need financial services to be more profitable than oil? Do we need it to be more extracting than oil as an industry? And so that's what it's really calling out to, is that there's a different way. And long term, it's a better way.
Yeah, very, very interesting.
So one of the stories that that we highlighted in there, actually, David from Sunrise Banks, he very graciously offered to tell his story about how his family starts a business and how they're able to have a purpose and profits at the same time. So we want to use those stories to illustrate, like what Brett say, there is another way.
Excellent. Yeah, that's one thing I'll say. And again, I've only had the opportunity to read the first chapter, but it really does come alive with stories of actual individual people, with cases. There is a very moral component to it, which I think is really compelling on the outset. And I do like the fact that it is, in some respects, part of the literature of these business books, as you talked about, Good to Great. I found that for myself, somebody who enjoyed reading a lot of those as a way to get up to speed, as a nice way to segue from things that I've learned and to see, okay, now we take the next steps, and now we divide, we go into that further. And I thought that was a really interesting way to approach that, without saying that we have nothing to do with these books. We just want to evolve these books in the way that these businesses have evolved. One thing I just wanted to talk about, and we're almost running out of time, but I did want to touch on this because I thought it was particularly interesting. There were three main communities, I think, that you talked about in the book. The role of women in particular, gig workers, and longevity and aging, which is one of the first ways I encountered some of your work, Theo, which I thought was really interesting, because you don't hear a lot about that community talked about, even though for obvious reasons they're extremely important. I wonder if maybe just briefly you could talk about why those three communities were the ones that you wanted to put at the center of some of the conversation in the book.
Well, it's exactly for the reason that you say we don't talk about it enough, right? So for example, for older adults, oftentimes we have a few bias, shall we say, right? That A, they're not tax savvy, which cannot be further than the truth. B, well, I literally got told by a banker, and I think I probably had relayed that a couple of times. We already have their money in the bank. Why do we need to do more for them? Question mark. And so, like what we always talk about, there's a lot that we can think beyond just taking their money and lending it to people. And the fact is, we are changing the way that we're living. We're changing the way that we're working and earning money. It's an example of gig workers. So the way we approach money, our relationship with it has to change as well. So the question is, are banks going to come and help us, or are we going to go look towards the fintech providers? It's an opportunity, right?
And just jumping in really quick about gig workers, we work with companies like Stevo that are focused on the income side of the balance sheet, which most banks and most fintechs don't even think about. They're like, oh, well, we'll tell you how to spend, and we'll tell you how to avoid that cup of coffee, and we'll tell you like what you're doing wrong, But how about the other side of that, which is let's help you actually get a better job than driving that car, or maybe more
Great.
efficiently driving that car. And so it's important so that we think about the way that people are working today. It's in many cases a mix-up of different jobs and different sources of income that change dramatically over time. And so we need to be able to sit there and help people financially grow their income as well.
Excellent. Very, very insightful.
Yeah, I heard someone actually just recently said something. I think it is so true. For financial institutions, we so typically focus on the profitable segment of the market. And there's a whole big segment of the market that are deemed less desirable, shall we say. But they're also the people that are using financial services, just that they get dinged for it. They have to pay more for it. So why don't we put some of the energy and help lifting them up, help them get financially healthier so they will be profitable customers? I mean, it seems to make sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, again, I want to thank you both very much for a really, really fascinating conversation, both about some of the things you're going to be talking about in Finovate Spring, as well as some of the topics that have been covered in the book Beyond Good, which I really hope our listeners managed to get a copy of. I think they're going to be very glad that they did. I thought maybe by way of closing, maybe you could tell us just some of the things that you're most looking forward to. We talked about sort of this odd year that we've had. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to as we're getting 2021 underway, particularly regarding fintech and financial services?
Wow, that is a interesting question to ponder. I was going to say I would wish to meet people in person, but that might have to wait a little bit later. I am very excited with a lot of the development, as Brad said in the very beginning, of people wanting to change and people wanting to do something different. I'm hopeful for the development from the past year has given people a time to pause and rethink what they're doing, and hopefully we can rebuild better with a purpose.
And I'm really excited about the continuation of the model, serving more and more people and looking at the business a different way, like aspiration and the way that they bank and the way that they sort of call out investments in coal and fossil fuels, and companies like Daylight that focus on LGBTQ, and just there are so many opportunities within this space to make banking better. And truly the Disneyland of fintech at Finovate is really, for me, what got it all started. But what I will say is there's so much more opportunity to make this because it's a small world after all.
And let's hope that none of these will be the niche of banking, but more so become the mainstream.
Excellent. Excellent. And I think that's a wonderful point to end on. I want to thank you again, Theo and Bradley, for joining us for a fantastic conversation here at Finovate Spring and on Finovate TV. Again, going to be looking forward very much to your presentations at the event. Definitely going to be looking forward to finishing the rest of the book that I got to start last weekend. And again, looking forward to seeing you both in person sooner than later, hopefully.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us on Finovate TV. We'll see you next time.